with Indigenous communities. For the past 3 years, Gilles has worked in partnership with IODE Services volunteers to help get parcels of clothing and footwear to remote Northern Ontario Indigenous communities. Gilles says that he gets his strong work ethics from his mother and his great sense of teamwork and connection with others from his Ojibway grandfather. Now we'll hear from Sergeant Gilles Lachance, and he'll tell us more about the northern communities IODE has worked with since 1943 and how our volunteers can help going forward. Gilles.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. That was very nice, Virginia. Thank you. I have a little PowerPoint presentation today, and I tried to concentrate more on pictures and stories as opposed to words, which are usually hard to see. And Virginia's kind of covered a little bit of my bio. Thank you. I know where you got that from. That's great. And it's my honor, actually, and privilege to be here today. We first met a few years back, actually through Marty up in the Northwest, my counterpart. I have some pictures of Marty, and it's been an honor to help facilitate the delivery of well-needed goods right across mainly the northern part of Ontario, but also we've made a new connection with one of our west region, counterparts as well. I've been on the job now with the OPP for 32 years and still love coming to work every day. And this is a big reason why I like to do that, is these kind of things that they're helping out, right? I do have a PowerPoint, and I do see the share screen button. I'm going to just insert that. And everybody can see that all right?
Yes.
Excellent. And it's kind of neat. We've done quite a bit of training. I'll speak about some of our training too. And we've done a lot of Zoom conferences and Zoom training. And traditionally, you know, a lot of times to make it work, if you have a lot of participants, you have to actually have the cameras off, right? Sometimes both ways, but this is great. We do get to see the odd person. It's interesting when you're presenting. You don't have that feedback sometimes, especially if you pull out one of your best jokes and nobody laughs. But at the same time, it's great to be here today. It's an honor. So there's just kind of the start. I'm a sergeant with the OPP, and I'm the coordinator for Northeast Region. So basically from North Bay area, up north to the James Bay coast, across over to Chapleau area, Wawa, down to Manitoulin Island and towards Parry Sound. That's kind of a summary of the area that I cover. I'm often out in the Northwest, and we're also deployed heavily across the province. The first few slides that I'm going to take, and I know I'm going to watch the time as well for my time allotted. The first 4 or 5 slides kind of talk about the background of where we came from. And I think it's important because you kind of, when we're dealing with contacts and stakeholders, and Virginia and I have talked about this a few times, you kind of got to know the history of a community or somebody to know kind of how you can best serve them and just kind of be more valuable in the relationship building. Our Indigenous Policing Bureau, unfortunately, from back in the day, IPRWASH wasn't a great event for the police back then. We came in as supporting an occupation with Indigenous people in IPRWASH Provincial Park down in the west. And tragically, there was a police shooting, a member that was killed, Indigenous member, and the officer was convicted criminally for that. And back then, there was a lot of political pressure on the police and influence, where today there isn't that. And this is kind of the reason why we're here today. And since those tragic events, there's been a lot of teachings and healings with actually the families of that community, and we've kind of moved forward, and we're a lot better because of it. The main focus for us back then, we were kind of criticized for not having communication strategies, not looking for assistance of mediators that were First Nations and community contacts, not building relationships and whatnot. And that's all the stuff we've done since then. And this is why we are who we are today. This is just kind of our our whole kind of foundation of our program, right? So our primary jobs as a provincial liaison team, so you'll hear the acronym PLT, and that's what I'll use a lot as opposed to provincial liaison team. So we're PLT officers, and we mediate, we do liaison work, we build relationships in communities, we facilitate contentious issues and demonstrations. We spend a lot of time doing family liaison work, dealing with tragic events or emergency management evacuations. And if you look at kind of the our objectives from our framework policy, right, it's we do a lot of resolving conflict, managing crisis, but kind of in the middle, there's a few words that talk about accommodation, mutual respect for not only Indigenous communities but non. And the reason why we do all that is so that when the police do have to move in at an event, we're using the minimal use of force. And I'm proud to say there hasn't been an inquest since the tragic days of 1996. And one of the reasons I want to put the slide is if you look down at the bottom middle picture with the cruisers and the officers, that's kind of how, years past people saw the police and the OPP. You're going to see pictures now where, we're not just there for incidents where people are getting arrested. We're actually at community events. We're working with youth. We're mentoring youth, and we're doing a lot of great things in communities as well. So we're human just like everybody else. Part of our mandate, of course, is just basically open, transparent lines of communication with all stakeholders that are impacted, right? And that's important because what's relevant to what we're doing here today and with IODE and the OPP, our liaison, is we have those communications, we have those contacts, we have the ability to reach to any community, any First Nations community in Ontario, have a conversation to see maybe what is needed and relay that information back so that if you're looking at donating, you're getting the right items out and the much needed items, and there's kind of that great connection. And that picture I have here is just some of our liaison members in the Northeast. At one of the spring flooding evacuations where members from the James Bay coast were brought down to Kapuskasing, Hearst, and Cochrane, and they're just hanging out supporting mom with her little guy and just doing some great stuff in the community. Some of our responsibilities just talks about anything where there's a community impact. So you look at, when you look at the next slide, I think I'll talk about it coming up, some of the history for IODE. There's a kind of a correlation when you look at helping for disasters and charitable things. Although we're not really a charity organization, we certainly have the ability to implement a lot of community events and stuff through policing, and it's kind of part of our business, right? And the reason why we're kind of good at what we do is because we know the history. It's taken us years to learn that, the traditions, the cultures. We know, for example, I know if I'm talking to Virginia about certain communities, probably what the community need is, whether it's baby clothing, women's clothing, men's clothing, any certain items. If we don't have the knowledge from a community, we have a team somewhere that does, and we make those connections, right? And not only are we dealing with leaderships at times and stuff, we're dealing with the community itself. It's not always leadership that always knows. It might be an elder, it could be a youth group, it might be a hockey team. We do a lot of stuff ourselves aside and kind of in parallel. And when we're doing donations and handing out donations for IODE, a lot of times we're piggybacking with some of the other stuff we may have accumulated, like sports equipment, which I'll talk about after, in our other items, right? So basically for us, when you look at thinking of the police years ago, they always pictured folks showing up in uniform. The last couple of bullet points here show like what we actually do today. We make time for victims and families. We help out for major events, right? We're there to be a liaison for not just victims and families, but the communities. So here, when you talk about IODE and the OPP liaison team, there's a few pictures here that I put in, and also I kind of stole that first point off your website, just a summary of some of the points when you talk about IODE being dedicated to enhancing the quality of life, serving changing needs of society, assisting victims of disasters, and meeting community needs, right? So that's kind of where we try to be a conduit to help that. So you see a picture of some of the boxes that are at the Hamilton office with some of the bags, and then there's one of our units I'm lucky enough to have a unit that has a large storage capacity in the back, so we can kind of double up on our load, and we're able to help facilitate taking the equipment from anywhere pretty well in Ontario, in this case Hamilton, and going to where it needs to go. Now, one of the interesting things about this, especially when I first started working with Virginia, and prior to that working with much needed sports equipment up to the far north, we used to get asked by commanders, so what's this costing the OPP to get that there? Because everybody's in challenging times. We know what it would cost if you tried to ship those boxes up to the far north, or most of your budget would be in shipping as opposed to getting well needed goods. And in this case, I mentioned that it's not costing anything, and they said, well, how does it not cost anything? I said, well, for example, if we had to go down to Hamilton to grab a load of boxes, because I work across Ontario, or I have counterparts that do that, we will call ahead of time. We'll make arrangements for a day, and while I'm going down to Hamilton to pick up the boxes, I'm also in Burlington doing other meetings for other operations we have on the go in the province, because we also do a lot of other multiple events. So while we're down there, we grab it. I live in North Bay in this case, so I'll be back to North Bay with the boxes probably same day. And then I have members peppered all through the Northeast. So we're always getting together for multiple events. So we kind of do the piggyback and the relay. So the boxes leave North Bay, end up in one of my other officers' units. You'll see some pictures coming up, a little bit of the James Bay coast and the far northwest. And Christine, for example, lives in Timmins, so she can be in Cochrane at the headquarters for Anishinaabe Police within a couple of hours. And then those boxes are on a plane, thus transporting officers up to the far northwest. And at the end of the day, they end up getting there, and it didn't cost anybody a dime because we were all going there anyway for work, right? So we try to make it work, and we try to go through the challenges like everybody else. And of course, nobody has money these days because that's just the way it is, but that's how we try to make it work. What I really like about my first conversations with Virginia was the fact that she was talking about, her contacts and many of her counterparts, a lot of volunteers that actually call the communities to see what they want. That third point at the bottom, the communities, when I first started, we used to get, we started asking, what would you like if you were looking for something, as opposed to them getting something that they may not need in that area. And it doesn't mean that they're not appreciative, but I'll give you an example. We had 40 sets of downhill skis dropped off one time at an equipment drive. And I diplomatically told the organizer where this stuff is going, there's no downhill skiing. So it's a nice gesture, but it's not going to work for that community, right? But what I did do was, we have other places that have ski hills in the area. So we contacted some of the communities and some of the contacts, some of the First Nations police or the band offices, and we're able to get the awesome ski equipment to the communities as part of the ski program for fitness classes in the communities that have ski hills, right? So it's all making it work and knowing what they want. And Virginia and I talked this week just about another place up near Cochrane where we're going to connect her with somebody there so that she's able to have a conversation with somebody from the community and send what they want, and we'll gladly come down anytime to pick it up. In the last couple of years, I heard it mentioned earlier, the challenges of COVID, extremely challenging, sorry, but we certainly, did our best with you, with your organization to make it work. There was sometimes delays in getting items there, and with COVID, we reassured them everything is, in good order. They were really impressed. I have to say, every time I deliver stuff from IODE, they're really impressed by what they're getting, how neatly packed it is, how organized it is. So they really, really appreciate it. And that comes right across the board from everybody that we're dealing with. So where do the donations go? If you look at the Northeast, I just did a little map. I know sometimes it's hard to see communities and stuff on a map, especially on a PowerPoint that's not in the same room. But the highlight here that I tried to focus on was the James Bay coast, Attawapiskat, Saskatchewan, Fort Albany, Moose Cree, and then Moosonee is actually right with Moose Cree. So those are 4 Indigenous communities that are up the James Bay coast. And then Moosonee, even though it's not an Indigenous community, it is populated by about 84% of Cree population, right? And a lot of stuff that we get for the Northeast goes that way. But if you're looking at perception and distance and stuff, just to give you an idea, if you haven't been north, and it's interesting because some folks haven't, a lot of our officers, when they come to work north, have never been north of, say, North Bay. If you're in Hamilton and you drive to North Bay, it's about a 4-hour ride if we're not talking about traffic. And then if you go from North Bay to Smooth Rock Falls, Cochrane area, you're talking about 4 to 5 hours, depending on the weather. So that's 8 hours from Hamilton. And in the wintertime, you can actually drive up to Moose Cree, even though Moose Cree is an island in the James Bay, you can drive there. And it's probably 5 to 7 hours on a mostly back isolated road, more of a bush road with frozen river crossings. There's no bridges. And then when you get to Moose Cree, you'd be going up to Attawapiskat, which is another 4 hours from Moose Cree. A lot of that is on the James Bay itself. So it's just in distance, right? And when we talk about my counterpart, Marty, up in the Northwest, I'm just going to go to the next slide. So you see the James Bay, and if you look left of the James Bay, the first communities are what I just talked about. All the rest that are peppered to the far left, that's all in the Northwest. And I would say those numbers that I gave you of driving time, which were probably 18 to 20 hours, that's halfway to where Marty is up in the Northwest. So start tacking on another 10 to 15 to probably air freight. So that's the distances and stuff that's encountered, right? And in shipping, which you would know from trying to get quotes for shipping, it's not even affordable to ship it. So we're very fortunate, for example, in this case, Anishinaabe Police Service, a lot of their communities are fly in from Sioux Lookout, Thunder Bay, Dryden, Kenora. So they fly out probably daily, 2-3 times a day, or a week, I should say. So we're able to throw some boxes on there for free and get them up to where they need to go because they're going to all the communities that you're serving. When you look up in the Northwest, for example, a lot of the names that I've seen on the boxes, Fort Hope, Osnaburg, Kingfisher, Winneman Lake, North Caribou, they're all peppered kind of up in the Northwest. They're all fly-in. Some are road access in the winter only, and they would not get any of this much needed items if they didn't have services in great organizations like IODE. And I want to give a little mention too to the West region, which we connected Virginia with a couple of our Liaison members out that way. And even though it's in southwestern Ontario, there is a connection. There is communities down that way that actually need clothing and items as well. So they've had Jason. I'm not sure who else Virginia has been up besides Jason, but from our Liaison team to be over there to help deliver some of the items as well. When you look at some of the work that our liaison officers do, so part of the things that we do, for example, is the hockey equipment, right? There's a big annual tournament in Mississauga. It's called the Little NHL, Little Native Hockey League. You're talking about 220 hockey teams from across Ontario. So items like hockey equipment, for example, if a lot of these communities didn't get some hockey equipment, they wouldn't have kids that could afford to go. So that's a side thing that we'll do. What I've done in the last couple of years is, even though, for example, in Hamilton, where Virginia's packing boxes that we're grabbing and they're going to set communities, we're always grabbing extra items. We'll have a talk and, whether it's, knitted items, women's clothing, men's jackets, right? It's that kind of size stuff. And I've actually brought it to the equipment drives and we just hang it up, just like a store while we're there, and it all goes, right? So it's much needed. And we piggyback on other times that we have stuff as well, right? The far right picture up top, that's Christine. And Christine, of course, is a mom, but while we're working with our stakeholders, in this case, it's a evacuation where Quebec First Nation, there was a flooding and there was a mom down with some children, and Christine's just holding one of the babies for mom while she's getting stuff for her kids. And the bottom left, that's Christine again up near Ojibway, and it's just donations that can come. Like I said, a lot of our donations we're doing now come from IODE. We do have sports equipment that we also piggyback and try to do at the same time. And then we do have another one of our officers, and some of you may have heard of George Cucci, who used to be our Indigenous Awareness Training Sergeant. He has his own company now where he does training right across the province, but he has a a store that his daughter and wife run, and when they have extra clothing, we pick that up as well. So we never really can have too much. We can get rid of it really fast. It's just 3 or 4 phone calls and it's all gone and well used, right? Much appreciated. And just the bottom right, we do liaison work at the same time as we're working. We're, that's one of the officers at a demonstration, although it may look a little chaotic. It's a day in Espanola. There's a moment where they're in the intersection, they're off, and everything else is going smoothly. Some of our teams. So the bottom right, that's Marty there, and the far right, the handsome fellow with the black vest on and the gray sweatshirt. A couple of the officers with him. Up top on the far right, that's our team of full-timers. We're about 16 in the Northeast, but that's myself with Christine, Francis, and Todd. And Todd actually just retired from our unit. He was with us since the beginning as well, and a huge loss for us, but still was a big part in helping get stuff to where it needed to go as well. And that picture on the left of Francis and I, that's Kapuskasing in July. No, I'm just kidding. It's in the fall, of course, but it's in the fall. But rain or shine, snow, we'll get the stuff there. We can truck through anything, and we're going to make sure that we get it where it needs to go. One of the most important things about what is done by IODE and what we help facilitate, we always say it's all about the kids, right? The kids are getting the items at the schools that are specifically being asked for, whether it goes to a CAO, a band manager, a school principal. I've seen them all addressed to them all, and we kind of do the same. We're tapping into the resources. But basically, it's the kids. There are so many kids up there, and it's just, they're so happy. It's nice to see them when we show up as police, even though we're in plainclothes, they're not really afraid, right? There was a time up the James Bay coast, we have to be mindful of our history, that the OPP helped the government remove children to residential school, right? So we're very, very mindful of that. So we make sure that we're up there and we're trying to do good things as well, because a lot of elders that maybe don't speak English, remember the OPP used to only fly in for major criminal investigations. They only came in back in the day to remove children with the RCMP and the government. So now they see us coming in with sports equipment, or we're coming to a community event, or it could be a drug awareness day. So we're trying to do a lot of the good things so they see that we're human and we're interacting, right? Some of the pictures here. So the bottom left, when you talk about spring flooding, unless you've seen stuff in the media, you really can't picture it unless you've been there. So the bottom left picture where it shows a community and you see what looks like ice and water. So that's Kashechewan First Nation, and that's in the springtime from a few years back. And that water level is coming right up to that road, it looks like. But that's not a road, that's a dike that's probably 30, 40 feet high. And if you're standing on that dike in January and you're looking down at that water, there's no water there. It's bush and trees and for as far as you can see. So it's hard to imagine. That's overland flooding that comes from the James Bay that totally takes over all the landscape, and it's just on the verge of collapsing that dike. And to make the appreciation of how much water that is, that's a warehouse on the left side. That's a 2-story building. That's on the left side and the bottom, and that's how high the water comes up, or can come up. So that's why we'll get folks sometimes that are evacuated. And when they're down, for example, the top left, that's Christine and Teresa, and we have some kids in the police car, right? So they're just checking out the car, seeing that we're human. I wouldn't be surprised in this case if they're taking them for ice cream. That's just kind of what they do. While they're in the community of Kapuskasing on the top right, they had a splash park where they reserved it for the day, and they had a big bubble party, right? So fun thing. And what I like about the picture on the bottom right, it's hard to see probably from your end, but that's 4 children that were barely speaking to Christine and Teresa. And an hour later, when they're interacting at the community hall, they have lemons and they're making lemon smiley faces, right? So it just shows you that, everybody's human, and the kids just adore anybody that can, make a difference and help them out. So when you look at some donations, right, I was talking about we can grab donations from different entities, but IODE is probably our biggest source for over the year that we're helping facilitate these days. And we were going to Beaver House one time to deliver some donations. And we also had the opportunity to ask them about, because Virginia and I had talked about some extra clothing. That community in Kirkland Lake has a lot of folks that are marginalized, and there's a couple of First Nations communities in the area, a lot of folks that are homeless, or male, female. So we were able to actually grab not only boxes from George, from his family that he had. We were also able to grab a lot of stuff in Virginia. That's where the canes and the couple of the rods you had and stuff that we weren't sure could be used, they were gone. They knew actually 2 families that could use the carpeting that we brought up. That all went to this place. It was all gone that same day. Just another picture up in the northwest, up Marty's way. And basically that's, we make a phone call that shows up and then it gets dispersed, right? And that's the nice thing about us trying to, sorry. Oh, I thought somebody was saying something. So it's just, us trying to help get it where it needs to go. The last slide here is just, I know there's a time, I think I'm probably right around the 15 minutes. I'm trying to stay on track. If not, I'll talk for like 3 hours, but that's kind of a nutshell on what we do. And of course, I was talking about it earlier. So you look at the bottom right, it's just one of the communities that we were in, and they're just remembering the children where they had found the residential school graves and stuff. And that's a big part of our focus in organization with the OPP in the next probably 10 to 15 years is going to be supporting a lot of those investigations. We're very mindful when we go in somewhere. We're not pushy when we come in. We delicately ask what's needed. And, if they want stuff, great. And if they say, maybe next time, that's okay too, right? I did get asked by my commander what I did with my fleet hat when I was in Captain's Head Casing, but I told him I lost it, but I actually gifted it to my buddy Mahali in Captain's Casing there. So he's got my hat, and I only lost a few hours of discipline for losing my hat. No, I'm just kidding. Mahali was a person from Captain's Casing and just loved the police. Highly functional and challenged, but just adored the police, and we took him all over with us, and he helped wash our cars, and we hung out for a bit. And I think that's it from my part. I tried to keep it to about 15 minutes. If there's an opportunity, I'm not sure for questions, if there's any. I'm not sure if somebody would facilitate that or if they'll pop up on the screen. And of course, if nothing comes up today and there's post follow-up, you have my email. I can, certainly answer. We can, if there's anything else in the future, we look forward to working together, and we really appreciate working with IODE. And for me and our team, it's an honor and a privilege to help serve the communities. And thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sergeant Lachance. I see you put your phone number in your email. So if you have any questions, you can directly contact Gilles. And thank you very much for such an enlightening talk there. My gosh. Virginia, did you have anything else to say?
Yes, I wanted to give Gilles a great big thank you. It was wonderful hearing how you put together. We just see the work from our end, but seeing the pictures of the communities up north and seeing how well our things are received, I think is very important. It was wonderful to hear you say what happened in the past, but how you're working with communities now and addressing their needs. And it was wonderful when you gave us a pat on the back that we send a form to communities and they can check off what their needs are, that we're not just sending, as you said, a pile of skis when there's no ski hill. So that's greatly appreciated. Learning about the training and the work of the Indigenous Liaison team. We do have an honorarium for you that I hopefully will see you soon and can get to you. It may just have to go to fill up your gas tank, I don't know. But it is wonderful that we are able to work together. We really appreciate your time on a weekend, and the pictures, as you say, and everybody's, that famous saying, they're worth 1,000 words, because it does tell us so much about what's happening between the flooding and the smiles on the children's faces, and see some of your officers on the liaison team working in communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Catherine, did you have a question for us? If you turn on your...
I had a question for Gilles. I was just completely overwhelmed by your presentation. And I laughed out loud when you said Capascasing in July. That That was hilarious. What I'd like to know is what has been the most rewarding aspect for you of being part of the PLT?
So I would say just that interaction and trying to make a difference, right? And then, you know, you see children sometimes when they're younger, like I've been on the job for a little while, then you see them when they're maybe a little older and they're a mentor themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they're giving back. That's probably the biggest thing, is seeing that. We had an equipment drive in Constance Lake last fall, and we had a few items actually from IODE as well again, and I always bring that with me. They go very quickly, and it was the first time I'd seen this. One of the kids came in to get some new hockey equipment, and he brought his old stuff to give, because he got new stuff, so he gave his old stuff to us to donate. So I thought that was really cool that he would think of that at being 12 years old, right? So it was really nice to see.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks for that question, because yeah, it's very humbling, and they appreciate it and they love it.
Yeah.
Even in that case, you know, just the clothing, it's amazing. You know, there's a lot of folks out there that need it, and sometimes are marginalized and don't know how to get it. So we make sure we make those connections and we bring it to them. We may bring it to a community and they'll set it up to go to them, right? So it's much needed, and it gets there.
Thank you. Thank you. I know that we sometimes, not so much now, but in the past, kind of struggled about what to send where. So I think the communication that you have with Virginia has really helped us meet the needs of the communities in a better way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. And that's a big thing. George was a mentor of mine. That's what he used to say when I was younger. He just asked them. Like, I didn't know a lot about certain cultures, ask them and they'll tell you, right? So absolutely. It's a great thing.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Norma has a question.
Thank you, Helen. Gilles, I was just saying, as Catherine said, laughing about Kapuskasing in July. Be careful. I spent my honeymoon there in July, so.
Awesome.
But I appreciated the map you showed for where the locations are, the service goods are taken, because that gives us a good representation of how far what we donate is going. So thank you for doing that.
Well, that's great. It's the freight and the weight that really, and the size, right? It's hard to imagine. For example, Moosonee, which is considered a town, about 5,000 people, and is the hub for the coast, right near Moose Cree. A case of water bottles on sale is $20. Like, that's on sale. Just for, you know, where it's $2 down this way, or maybe $4. So that kind of gives you everything is inflated because of the freight delivery, right? So anything we can do to help that, and you know, in our case, it doesn't cost anything. We're going anyway a lot of times, right? So it just works out. So, and it's hard to imagine unless you've been there, right? So it's nice to kind of show the maps, and yeah, it's especially up in the far north. They really appreciate it, and it's well received.
And can I just put in a quick thank you to Norma? Norma got this process of working with the OPP going back a number of years ago. She was in touch with the London OPP, who put her in touch with Sergeant Mike Boussier, who's retired now, but who we really had enjoyed working with before he retired, and started this connection, which has certainly been grown wonderfully working with you, Gilles, certainly.